Let's have a look at Caroline Leavitt. She is, of course, the White House press secretary. Here she is explaining what is going on.
Looking ahead to tomorrow, April 2nd, 2025, will go down as one of the most important days in modern American history. Our country has been one of the most open economies in the world, and we have the consumer base hands down, the best consumer base. But too many foreign countries have their markets closed to our exports. This is fundamentally unfair. The lack of reciprocity contributes to our large and persistent annual trade deficit that's gutted our industries and hollowed out key workforces. But those days of America, beginning tomorrow, being ripped off are over. American workers and businesses will be put first under President Trump, just as he promised on the campaign trail. The president's historic action tomorrow will improve American competitiveness in every area of industry, reduce our massive trade deficits, and ultimately protect our economic and national security. President Trump's economic vision is rooted in common sense.
Well, we like things that are rooted in common sense, as we are the home of common sense, of course. Let's talk to Jeff Pohjola to find out what he makes of it all. Jeff, very good morning to you.
Morning.
Good morning. So, I mean, there's a lot of people here sort of getting worked up about this. Difficult to know precisely why they are, because, I mean, international trade is quite a complicated issue and it's quite a complicated subject, I think. But what are people in America saying about it?
Well, certainly it depends on whom you ask. You know, the Trump loyalists are going to buy what Donald Trump has to say, hook, line, and sinker, and the Trump opponents are going to reject what he has to say outright. But if you talk to most economists, they'll say that the tariffs that he has proposed thus far, what he's going to be proposing on the second notwithstanding, are likely to have a long-term negative effect on the American economy. Whether they have a greater overall effect on the global economy, something else to be said. But a protectionist trade holiday like we saw with Smoot-Hawley back in the 1920s didn't really work out for the United States back when we've tried it before. Obviously, things have changed in the century since then, so we'll have to see how things play out. But most economists here in the United States say it's ultimately going to drive up prices here for the American consumer when they're already dealing with rapid high inflation.
Yeah, I mean, prices are going up pretty fast there as it is, aren't they? What is the actual inflation rate there at the moment?
It's hard to say. We're expecting an additional report from the Economic Outlook coming up in the next few days or weeks. But I think it's hovering somewhere around 6 or 7% annually. I'm not 100% sure on that. You'll have to check my numbers.
Yeah, okay. But, I mean, this is the thing. I mean, people talk about pricing going up. They talk about, the immediate effect of tariffs. But, of course, I mean, when we saw the Mexico-Canada conversation, it was kind of backwards and forwards, wasn't it? You know, one minute it was a tariff going on, next minute the tariff was coming off, you know. So there's a lot of volatility as well coming out of the White House in terms of sometimes Donald Trump says he's going to do something and then he kind of undoes it.
Well, the other word to put forward is uncertainty, and certainly the markets don't like uncertainty.
Yeah.
And so you saw the Dow with mixed results today, but overall on a downward trend for both the Dow and the NASDAQ, tech-heavy NASDAQ index here in the United States. If they knew what was going to happen, obviously that would send stocks and bonds and the trading market to new highs. But uncertainty is not something that the markets like, whether it's good or bad. So in that sense, in the short term, I'd say Donald Trump isn't quite playing it how he would like to necessarily play it, but how the markets react to what he has to say on the second remains to be seen.
Right. I mean, if you were to walk down Main Street, USA, and ask people, you know, what goods they bought from foreign countries, like, for example, particularly Europe, they probably wouldn't know, would they?
Yeah, probably not, unless they drive a Volkswagen or a German-made automobile. But beyond that, most Americans don't pay attention to who buys or who manufactures what.
Yeah.
It's great to say, yes, we're going to buy made in the USA, but the typical American consumer, I don't think really pays that close attention. They just try to get the cheapest, or I shouldn't say necessarily the cheapest, but the best bang for their buck. They try to get the best value that there is. And I think that's rather a universal thing. I'm sure consumers in Britain do the same thing.
I think so, yeah. I mean, funnily enough, one of the things that used to always be a bugbear for me, because I spent a lot of time in the States, I lived there for 10 years, you know, it used to really annoy me that British cars are actually cheaper in America than they are in Britain. You know, I mean,
Yeah,
I can never quite understand that.
well, and certainly tariffs are something that's going to affect the automotive industry first and foremost,
Yeah.
because that's something that Donald Trump has focused on in the last few weeks and months, and certainly through the 2024 campaign. Whether or not it really has a long-term positive effect, we'll have to see. But because even if you take a look at some of the American manufacturers, say Dodge, or well, Dodge is actually now owned by Daimler Chrysler, but say Ford,
Yeah.
for example, a lot of their vehicles, while they say are American made, use a lot of foreign parts and
Right.
are actually manufactured in Canada or Mexico. They're not necessarily manufactured in the United States. Donald Trump wants to get all of those manufacturing jobs back in the United States. And while that's certainly a laudable goal, the dirty secret to that is it takes time. It takes a lot of capital for these companies to build up manufacturing plants in the United States. And then again, you also have the United States labor protections that you don't have, say, in Mexico or Canada. So ultimately, the cost of goods may end up going up in the long run. This is not something that economists are agreed upon, so I'm certainly not an expert to say what's going to happen next. So it's just wait and see at this point.
I think that's very much the case. It's a good thing. It's a good place to be, I think, waiting and seeing, particularly when Donald Trump's involved. Good to talk to you, Jeff. Thanks very much indeed. Jeff Pohjola, a reporter at Northwest Radio, Seattle there,